Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Tuberculosis cases among inmates worrying health ministry. Calls for more budgetary allocation to deal with infrastructural needs at the local level. And later in sports, former Cricket West Indies president calls for strengthening of territorial boards. Thanks for joining us. I'm Shamela Pullen. Here are the details. The Health Ministry is now conducting tuberculosis screening among inmates as 5 prisoners at one correctional facility have tested positive. The inmates have been hospitalized. It's not yet clear which facility is being affected by the disease. The Department of Correctional Services says no staff member has tested positive for the disease. So far, close to 100 inmates have been administered first-level tests for the disease. The number of Jamaicans developing renal failure and other complications as a result of kidney disease is worrying. That's according to Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton, who says the kidney transplant program in Jamaica could be further strengthened with supporting legislation and regulations. At least 104 persons with kidney-related issues are being treated at the Cornwall Regional Hospital in St. James. These persons are treated at least twice per week. The hospital has 18 machines that it uses to treat these patients. But Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says even with the best efforts, more needs to be done. He says data show that up to 900 persons require dialysis annually.
Things like an organ registry, where you list people who are donating or who have received, and you track that and so on, is a big part of it. All of that has to be grounded in legislation. So while we do have a transplant program here, it's limited. Trinidad probably is the largest transplant program in the Caribbean. They probably do, the last time I saw, they have done about 100 in the last 5-6 years. We are doing maybe 10 a year or something like that.
But Dr. Tufton says there's a challenge.
If you are able to successfully get a donor, you're going to live on medication also for the rest of your life to ensure compatibility is maintained and so on. And there's a lot of processes going up to that transplant, and then post-transplant you still have to do a lot. So it still involves a lot of effort, but it's an option to preserve life. It's an option. So we're working towards that, but the prevention is still by far the best.
Meanwhile, Dr. Tufton says consumption habits play a critical role in the management of diseases, including kidney failure, which is why he says the plan is also to develop a well culture to address some of these lifestyle issues.
It's something I'm very big on, and that wellness culture means putting yourself in a position where you can live a life that is fulsome, and we all die, we understand that, but doesn't require too many doctors' visit for illnesses, and certainly limited medication.
Dr. Tufton was speaking during a tour at the Cornwall Regional Hospital's renal department on Friday. Shamela Pullen, TVJ News. Meanwhile, Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton continues to lament the impact the increased numbers of trauma cases is having on public hospitals.
When someone comes in with a gunshot wound or a bike accident, head injury, they tie up the accident and emergency and the surgery team for hours and hours and hours, sometimes from a careless act, which has created the problem in the first place. So this is really a challenge that we face.
Despite promises from central government, local government representatives are calling for a quicker response to funding infrastructural developments. O'Shane Masters tells us more.
There's a call this afternoon for central government to look at further budgetary allocations to municipal corporations to improve critical infrastructure. The call comes from Chairman of the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, KSAMC, Delroy Williams. He says this is of even greater importance for Kingston as the government makes the country's capital more accessible to Jamaicans with the construction of highways.
When you look at what is happening in St. Thomas, for example, when you see the infrastructure being put in place to connect in an efficient way St. Thomas to Kingston, Portland to St. Thomas to Kingston, and connect the entire country. You understand from sitting as mayor of the city of Kingston how very critical this is.
But with the opening up of the city, Mr. Williams says more funds will be needed to uplift the infrastructure of Kingston. Hence, his call on Finance Minister, Dr. Nigel Clark.
We believe that the government has in its budget has to begin to look at I know you do it, but there are certain infrastructure like our markets, for example, critical to the economy of the city and to commerce within the city. But the huge investment in terms of the capital that is required to upgrade our current markets, the municipalities can't handle that on its own.
Mr. Williams says while the corporation can sell properties it owns, the usage of those funds could be problematic in upgrading the critical infrastructure in the area. Now, the government in recent years has stepped up its investment in downtown Kingston and has also issued numerous calls for private business owners to look to that area for its operations. To date, billions of dollars have been spent in upgrading the Kingston waterfront. Prime Minister Andrew Holness in May also declared that there are plans for greater investment in the development of the commercial and residential real estate in downtown Kingston. Mr. Holness said that discussions at the time were ongoing with the World Bank about developing a project for the urban renewal of downtown Kingston. He said the government believes that this can be a major catalyst for economic growth in the area. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
A dispute between two brothers over a bar bill in Little St. Elizabeth last night has left one dead and the other in custody. Dead is 30-year-old Kenworth Francis of Alitis address. His 29-year-old brother was captured in Spanish Town, St. Catherine after fleeing the scene. It's reported that Mr. Francis and his brother were at a bar when an argument developed over who should pay the bill. The argument led to a physical confrontation and threats. Relatives intervened, but the dispute spilled outside the bar. It's reported that Mr. Francis went to speak to his brother who hit him with his car before speeding off. The injured man was pronounced dead at the Mandeville Regional Hospital. The police were alerted and the car was found abandoned in Mandeville. Mr. Francis's brother was picked up sometime later by the Spanish Town police. More water supply systems are being rolled out in rural Jamaica, this time in South St. Elizabeth. It's part of the National Water Commission's drive to provide all Jamaicans with potable water. Kodian Bar tells us more.
South St. Elizabeth has been plagued with drought due to below-average rainfall, but commissioning of the new building water supply system in the parish is expected to benefit approximately 270 households.
This new building pipeline distribution project comes under the comprehensive project of the Essex Valley Water Supply Scheme and is valued at approximately 130 million.
Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Matthew Samuda, says this commissioning is one more on a list of rural areas that have seen commissioned in the past year. He says the system is an important signal that work is being done. And to the naysayers about the speed of the National Water Commission to provide potable water to Jamaicans,
the reality is pipes are not free, pumps are not free. The energy that these pumps use is not free. The several thousand employees of NWC have to be paid at the end of the month. Those who have retired have to receive their pension. So the reality is there is a transformation that is required for the National Water Commission. And we are on the way with that transformation.
in the meantime, Mr. Samuda says alternative energy sources will be explored to combat the high energy cost associated with providing potable water.
So the NWC has said it is going to pursue other energy sources to even out its pricing, to ensure that what happened to us earlier in the year when there was instability in Eastern Europe by way of the Ukraine and Russia war we're not affected in the same way when there's global instability. Earlier in the year, the energy cost to the NWC peaked above $1 billion a month.
The NWC has since commissioned a 50 kilowatt per hour system at the Mona Reservoir, which is expected to help the commission to save.
That $1 billion savings annually is going to allow me to invest in the people of rural Jamaica. It's going to allow the NWC to fulfill its mandate. It's going to ensure that the promise and the vision of the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness is fulfilled, which is potable water in the taps of all Jamaica.
Cody Barrett, TVJ News.
And it's now time for the Business Minute. Here's Cody Barrett.
Jamaica's net international reserves, NIR, saw a decline in October. $3.77 billion was in the reserves, a $32 million decline compared to September. At the end of September 2022, the NIR stood at $3.81 billion. The reserves at the end of October can cover up to 24 weeks of goods and services. In the global economy, China's trade shrank in October as global demand weakened and antivirus controls weighed on domestic consumer spending. On Monday, the customs agency reported that exports declined 0.3% from a year earlier to $298.4 billion, down from September's 5.7% growth. Imports fell 0.7% to $213.4 billion compared with the previous month's 0.3% expansion. China's global trade surplus edged up 0.9% from a year earlier to $85.2 billion. That's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Barrett.
It's now time for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, a hurricane watch has gone into effect for northwestern Bahamas. This comes as subtropical storm Nicole was moving towards the CARICOM country on Monday with no change of strength. Bahamas acting Prime Minister Chester Cooper says schools and government offices will be closed as Nicole is expected to produce heavy rainfall from now through to Friday. On the international scene, in the United States, voters started casting ballots in the midterm elections early Tuesday morning. This election will determine who will control the Senate and the House. Democrats, including President Joe Biden, are asking voters to see this less as a referendum on his presidency and more as a defense against a potentially destructive Republican majority. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Cody Barrett.
We head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your midday sports report with Jermaine Brown.